of Urban One and its management. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Speaking. Here are today's hosts.
Good morning, everyone. This is Nathaniel Lee. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining our show each week. I'd like to thank our listeners in Chicago, Atlanta, and California, also on our sister stations. We're a live call-in show, and our call-in number is 833-653-3529. Also, we have our superstar guest, Attorney Milton Grime. Attorney Grime starred the evolution in videotaping police misconduct with the Rodney King case, which was an instrumental, a transformation case in our judiciary system. So we're glad to have him. Also today, we have a special guest. We have the Marion County Prosecutor, Ryan Mears, and the Deputy Chief of Police, Kendall Adams. Now, before we get started, I'm going to digress a little bit because I do watch the news, and I'll start out with Prosecutor Mears. Prosecutor Mears, I was befuddled about the Georgia case. In Georgia, the former President Donald Trump and made calls to Georgia election officials in an effort to alter the election results. It was recorded on tape, and it's been well known. Well, the prosecutor, Fannie Willis, of course, they revealed that she engaged in a romantic relationship with one of the special prosecutors on the case. And for the life of me, I was trying to figure out, why was that such a big political story? It didn't make any sense to me. Maybe you can explain this, Prosecutor Mears.
Well, first of all, Nate, it's great to be on the program. And, I think this is one of those time-honored litigation traditions, is when you have bad facts, attack the process and attack the people. As someone who's an elected prosecutor, I can tell you that Ms. Willis did not engage in any unethical conduct. And the reality is that there's a lot of different people who have a lot of different relationships. The standard is, are your interests adverse to one another? And in this case, they are perfectly aligned. And this is nothing more than individuals trying to distract from the fact that the witnesses in this case and the evidence that's going to be submitted in this case is very compelling. And, you don't see people standing up there saying, we didn't do it. What they're saying is, well, we think the process is unfair because they had a relationship that somehow impacted our rights, which could, nothing's further from the truth. And so for me, this is just a way to try to distract the public and try to distract the judges and everybody else from the actual merits of the case, because, I don't believe they have a good shot when it comes to the merits. And so they want this case to be tried in the court of public opinion, and they want this case to be decided on procedural grounds rather than substantive grounds.
Well, Milton might have a question to follow, but I got one follow-up. You handle some high-profile cases yourself in your office. When you have those high-profile cases, do you get subtle threats from time to time as a prosecutor, or do people come out and attack the prosecutor's office? Is that normal?
Yeah, and I mean, they're not even subtle. They're pretty aggressive sometimes. And I get just a small percentage. If you look at what Miss Willis has had to go through in Atlanta, I mean, what's being said about her online, what's being sent directly to her office, is really unacceptable. And we've gotten to this place where we all like to think civility is important, yet there's so many people who don't honor that. Not only in the legal community, but in the public as a whole. And sometimes it translates into people making threats against me, against the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. And that's only magnified by a factor of 10 when you're dealing with Donald Trump.
Well, you have a question, Milton?
I think it's the responsibility of the prosecutor's office not only to not have conflicts, but to not show an appearance of conflict, not to give the opposition, or in a high-profile case such as this, an opportunity to attack them with irrelevant material. Because anytime you throw against the wall feces against the wall. Let me just be blunt. Somebody going to think it's evidence, you know? And that's just how the public is. So I agree with you in concept, but I think in practice, when we are in positions where we're going to be scrutinized for our every breath, then we owe a duty to the public to maybe restrain and withhold our personal lives as much as possible from getting involved. That's my only criticism.
Well,
I don't think you go on a honeymoon to Cancun with your new lover who's in the office. They're getting paid to some people a big salary, more than most people make in a lifetime, maybe 650,000. But you're being judged by people who have nothing else to do but just pick at you, pick at you, pick at you. And I hate that she gave them that target, personally.
well, Prosecutor Mears, how did you defend that? But one thing I need to clarify, folks, for the audience, 650,000 attorney fees for 2 years is not a high fee. I mean, the cases I work on, I see lawyers' bills are millions of dollars for doing a lot less work than what they're doing on that case. But, so I want to make sure that in terms of overall scheme, we hear a number like $600,000, that's not a high fee for attorney services for a case like that. Okay, Prosecutor Mears, how do you fix that, by the way?
Yeah, and I think I hope people understand he's getting paid $250 an hour, which is not an outrageous sum. And
Right.
on a case like this, he's working a lot of hours because of what the defense is doing. They unnecessarily tried to remove this to federal court. They filed a ton of motions on this case. And, most of what they're doing is responding to things that are candidly quite absurd. In all my years of practice, I've never seen a defendant be able to remove a criminal case from state court to federal court. Yet they tried to do that, and they had to litigate the merits of that, which was, of course, denied because it's not a real thing. But when people talk about that fee, number one, the hourly rate is not very high. It's $250 an hour. But on top of that, he's working a ton of hours because of some of the frivolous motions that are being filed in this case. And Trump's got an army of lawyers. I read yesterday his super PAC spent $50 million on legal fees. So they're throwing all sorts of money at this case to try to make it go away and bury people in paperwork. And so that the fees reflect kind of the litigation strategy of defense more than it reflects what the state's trying to do.
And one thing I need to add to that too, Prosecutor Mears, that's very important. Saito, the lawyer that Trump hired in the last 9 months, I saw where his fee today was $1.2 million.
Right.
The guy that been working on this case for 7 months has billed and been paid $1.2 million on one of 5 defense lawyers on the Trump side.
I'm not disagreeing with what you guys are saying, but sometimes when you're in a public life like some of us, like we are, you have to hold your personal life back some. That's all I'm saying. Why give them that opportunity to attack your personal life? Because a lot of people make judgment on emotions and things that are irrelevant, but you're giving them that. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I agree with you, Attorney Grimes, because it's an incredible sidetrack to me in the terms of how this was gaining publicity, particularly in that right-wing media. It's almost like they're a bunch of criminals now. I mean, it was insulting when I saw some of the posts.
I mean, I'm sure you guys haven't, but when I was married, I had side relationships sometime. I had to cover for a while. I mean, you got to do what you got to do in this life. Then my wife and I, my ex-wife and our best friends, we talk about, you're right. But come on, guys, be real.
Okay.
Mr. Adams, you can hold your head up, please.
Okay. The next topic that the community, the reason I got these law enforcement officials is that the community, we want to know in Indianapolis and in other cities, what are we going to do to stem this violent crime? In our state, our Republican-controlled legislator decided to give everybody guns, essentially. very few limitations. And I saw even that our AG is trying to litigate some cases by the federal government, so what are we going to do to stem this tide in view of the fact that now we have open access to guns, open carry in the state, Deputy Chief Adams? And you're on mute.
Yes, sir. Mr. Lee, Mr. Grimes, that was hilarious. A hilarious statement you made. So I just had to acknowledge that. So yeah, I mean, Mr. Lee, I mean, you're right. I mean, as we look at the temperature of our state legislators who have rolled back common sense gun laws, we're concerned. And I think we're concerned as a law enforcement community. We're concerned as a community in general, because, guns have no bigger impact in Marion County than any other county, right? So Rush County, I get it. It's not an issue in Rush County. But here in Marion County, there is no singular more important issue than what I would call common sense gun laws. And we talk about the banning of guns without a permit, carry, and 21 and above being able to carry guns. As you all know, 18 is now the legal limit to carry guns. And as we talk about that, we've seen an increase in juvenile shootings, both in terms of homicides and shootings. And so I say all that to say that when you say what are we going to do about it, I think we're going to continue to hold those accountable that are carrying guns illegally. And Prosecutor Mears has been an important partner in that perspective. He's been an important voice in that perspective. I think one thing that we have to do as a community is continue to encourage our legislators to go back to the state house to continue to advocate for common sense gun laws. I think that's one tool in the tool bucket. It's not a panacea. It's not, but it certainly has hampered our ability as law enforcement to hold those accountable. It certainly has impacted the community as we've seen the rise in juvenile, even homicides and or shootings. Both have increased. I think in 2021 we had 12 fatal juvenile shootings, 18 and below. Last year we had 21. So, and I think the year before that, in 2022, we saw a slight increase. So my point is, we saw 12, 15, and now 21 juvenile homicides as a result of gun violence. So we are seeing that increase. Obviously, we've seen more non-fatal shootings, and we have to do something about it. And I think we have to be a voice. Law enforcement has to be a voice, as we saw Superintendent and Prosecutor Mears. Even I think Chief Taylor went up to the state legislator. We saw Mayor Hogsett go over to the state legislature. Do that too as a community. We have to continue to hold our legislators accountable, although we know there's a supermajority that shouldn't quiet our voice.
Well, Prosecutor Mears, from the prosecutor's standpoint, how do you handle particularly these increase in teen violence? What's the plan?
Well, first of all, I mean, I think we have to be honest about the problem. And, when you allow everyone to walk around and carry a gun, the consequence of that is it filters its way down to young people. The number one case that we have filed in our juvenile courts is dangerous possession of a firearm, meaning kids who are less than 18 with a gun. That's the number one charge that we file. Whereas a couple of years ago, the number one case we filed was theft. And so it just goes to speak to how prevalent the guns are. Just this week, we had a shooting at Beech Grove High School. We were able to find that we were able to identify that individual, arrest them, and charge that individual. We had a situation at Crispus Attucks High School this week where someone brought a gun. We had very high profile incidents at other high schools and other school districts in our community. And one of the things that, Chief Adams does a great job of working on that we take a look on is where are you guys getting these guns? And it's just becoming incredibly easy for young people to access these firearms. And if they're going to have access to firearms, unfortunately, they are going to use them. And that's our frustration, is just we've seen a huge proliferation of kids with guns in our community. And One of the things that we're working really hard on is Chief Adams and I are working on one of these things, which is working directly with young people to empower them to not only walk away from conflict, but also be leaders on their block and on their basketball team and their school district. Let them be leaders to hopefully convince kids not to be involved with guns, not to carry guns. We are trying everything, but I think one of the things that we have to be honest about is it's never been easier for a 16-year-old to get their hands on a gun. And I know that because we've never filed more cases. And IMPD has never, unfortunately, had to arrest more young people with guns. And so we just have to be honest about it.
Go ahead, Milton. What were you saying?
With the proliferation of social media and a kid sitting up there saying, I just got my kit. I got it. You can make a gun yourself. In a lot of cases I've come across deal with ghost guns. So it was the manufacturer. Now you got the social media. You got people just selling the parts to make a gun, and all of a sudden the kid has a semi-automatic or an automatic weapon in their hand that they put together, and all they have to do is have bicycle mechanic ability to make these damn guns today. So it's a societal problem. It's a social problem. What are we going to do? I don't know. I don't know the answer. I haven't studied it as much as you two gentlemen, but something's got to stop.
Yeah, Milton, you made a great point. I mean, I think one of the things that, we've tried to do on the police department side is, as we evaluated these gun cases, you're exactly right. A lot of these, used to be a drug deal gone bad. Now particularly for youth, it's what's happening on social media and how that retaliatory mindset can continue to grow to the point where you have a 17-year-old not able to process all of this, probably being raised by a grandparent who has no idea how to deal with social media. And so now they're learning how to deal with issues via social media. So one of the things, so I've doubled down on, so we have a lot of task force officers embedded with agencies such as FBI, ATF. One of the things I've asked ATF to do specifically here in Indianapolis is to look at, one, where are the guns coming from, particularly for youth, because we know they're not buying. And is there an ability for us to forward cases where individuals we know have provided guns to youth? So I've asked them to look at that. We call it e-trace information to really determine who purchased the gun. Basically, where did that gun change hands from? And if we can find a case either state or federally where we can prove that the person who provided the gun to the youth did it in a way that they knew that youth was going to use it to commit a crime, then obviously we're asking both prosecutor and U.S. attorney to look at those cases and see if there's some traction there to charge. We have hired, I think we have 25 analysts now within the Metropolitan Police Department that are evaluating social media every day. Every Thursday, we've got about almost 120 law enforcement in a room looking at past week shootings, both homicides and non-fatals, to see are there opportunities for us to intercede. And I say that because the analysts play an important role. Obviously, I'm aware of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, but I don't have time to actually dive into people's accounts and really see what they may be saying. Well, these analysts do, and so they were able to take two groups last year that were feuding on social media. They were talking about shooting each other, as you talk about, Mil. I mean, some of these kids are getting on social media with guns in hand, going to shoot this person in this other group. So these analysts were able to extract these two groups, and we were able to do an operation on both those groups that we had little information about. So Milton, you're exactly right, and I think the police department is keenly aware of that. So to that point, we've asked our analysts to do two things, look at the source of guns to see if we can forward cases both at the federal and state level, and then two, get in front of these retaliatory acts before they occur.
Let me go to the line. I get a caller A caller, you had a comment about, we're talking about teens and guns. You had a comment about that, MOTF?
Yes, sir. Yes, how you doing, Brother Motep here? Thanks, Nate, and Attorney Grimes, Deputy Chief Adams, and Prosecutor Mears. I've talked to you a number of times. Thanks for taking my call. Just a couple questions of trends that still disturb me and us and the social, civil community, activists who are in the community, those of us who are mentors and coaches, which I am in the community. One I had for my employer. Milton, I want to address this first question. I want to throw to you, Milton. I had to go through my employer to the Marion County Jail here in Indianapolis. And I had people for the particular company escort me through because for what I was doing, I had to go get some things done from a particular inmate there. And people who work there told me it's about 2,400 people in the Marion County Jail. And out of that 2,400, almost 1,500 were Black. It just blew me away. I went from first to the third floor. I saw it all with my own eyes. It's ridiculous. So, Milton, I'm throwing that to you. How is it 13% of the population, over 50 to 60% in jails, and that's countrywide? That's countrywide. That's not just here. I did the research. That's all over the place. How is that? Because that links to predatory policing, and which maybe Chief Kendall Anderson has. And number two, you, Prosecutor Mears, the attack on the judiciary, the attack on prosecutors. I know what happened with Fannie Willis, Attorney Grimes, is disconcerting. But generally, there's been an attack on the judiciary. There's an attack on Letitia James, attack on the other brother. There was Trump this week tried to lambaste the judge. Alina Baba tried to implicate the attorney for E. Jean Carroll and Judge Kaplan having some relationship, and she had to back off of that. Attorney Mears, Black people have complained for decades about the disparaging treatment in the judiciary, from judges on down. Prosecutors. They just put a prosecutor in jail in Louisiana for withholding exculpatory evidence that would have freed someone who was locked up 18 years. So how do we balance that? We do as Black people know that there is a double standard in the legal system. My mother's been an attorney 50 years, and I've heard it for my life. So how do we balance that? Because we know Trump and his subordinates are instigationalists, I would say. But there is some truth to the matter. There is some holes there, and we have definitely been the ones who've gotten the deficient treatment from those holes. And I'll see your answers off the air. Thank you.
Well, that was a lot of questions. Before the expert panel gets started, Milton, I'm going to point something out that the caller didn't know. I used to be vice president of the local Indianapolis NAACP back in the 80s. At that time, what got me actively involved in this process, back in 1986, I believe, there were 1,200 people in the Marion County Jail, and I did a criminal case, and I represented a white guy. And they did a lineup in the Marion County Jail with sheriff deputies. And, I moved to suppress. Their defense was they didn't have enough white guys in Marion County Jail to do a lineup, right? Now, the reason that was important, so I went and studied, there was 1,200 people in Marion County Jail at the time here in Indianapolis, 1,148 were African-American. And so that started this process. I started actively getting involved with the police department. And now we made dramatic improvement because the prosecutor and the department are doing a much better job. But back then, it was like 95%, and we're 9% of the population. So I don't think most people realize that we made dramatic improvements in terms of racial prosecutorial type things here, particularly in Marion County, probably one of the best in the country. But go ahead, Milton.
I don't know where to start because I recognize what the caller is talking about. We have out here in California a Racial Justice Act that is difficult to enforce. I've filed it twice. It blocked every time. But whereas it's a recognition that there's a disparity in the criminal justice system, at least for African Americans and people of color. I think Colorado did a study and a survey that I'm sure Mr. Adams may know about, where the prosecutors and the police kept statistics, and they confirmed that there's a disparity between the arrests and the charges of African Americans. The DAs, I think, in 8 counties agreed to that. Here we have an incarceration of every 100,000 white, every 100,000, what is it? 179 out of every 100,000 white men in our society out here in California or in the criminal justice system. 1,700 and some black men out of 100,000. 1,700 out of 100,000 are in the criminal justice system. So why is that disparity? I mean, it's obviously there statistically. We far outnumber whites in the criminal justice system as a race. Are we more criminally oriented, Mr. Adams? Is it more of us criminals than, say, whites? So that Racial Justice Act allows us to request of the prosecution to show us, especially for sentencing, why is there a difference in a white person who's accused or found guilty of molesting or even rape? They get one type of sentence, whereas black people go to prison for longer sentences. So there's a disparity in sentencing, obviously, there in California. We haven't been able to solve that issue yet. The state of Washington, back in 2020, the Supreme Court there, all 9 justices signed a bill or a statement that they were going to look back at cases over the decades to correct injustices that they admit happened during the Supreme Court existence, over 100 years or more. And they have undone some of their decisions, reversed some of their decisions that were obviously racist over the years. Back in the state of Washington, their Supreme Court acknowledged that. You had a judge up in Northern Virginia who said, I'm not going to try any more black people in my court. I ain't trying no more blacks, as long as those white men pictures are on the wall, because it's not fair and it's unjust and it's bias and prejudice to them receiving a fair trial. So I'm not going to perpetrate this racism anymore. So it's all around us. It may not look like it because we're so used to it, but it is all around us. There's an unfair criminal justice system, gentlemen, when you look at it objectively. And I try to look at it objectively. I keep these pictures on the wall to remind me of what I feel is still existing. No, not slavery in the old form, but the criminal justice system that accepted private prisons and stuff, and knowing that it doesn't feed, doesn't care, doesn't give them medical supplies, that it's a moneymaker. So I don't like to participate in the cover-up or the perpetuation of this injustice in our profession, in the criminal justice system as a lawyer, but I can't do very much about it on every individual case. I can raise a little hell, and then I can agree to a disposition that I don't think is fair still, but damn, it sure is fair compared to what we were looking at, bro. Yeah. You follow me? So that's what I'm faced with, man. You know, I did the Rodney King case, and I was fortunate enough to inherit a video of a serious beating that when I first saw it, Adams, on video, I was in a death penalty case, and this friend of mine, Ron Jesse, played football out here with the Ram. He asked me, could I represent this friend? And I looked at it and I'm going, man, they got to stop beating brothers like that in South Africa. This stuff got to stop. You follow me? That was my first reaction. And then I was getting dressed to go to the gym, and I'm going, it's not South Africa. Bus is here in LA. I'm serious. I think it's too big to be in South Africa. So my first reaction to it was to put it over in another country, but in reality, it was happening right here in LA, man, you know? And so, I've read a lot about this stuff lately, more than I did 10 years ago, about the history of Jim Crow and racism, and especially right there where y'all are in Indianapolis. This boy Stevens back in the 20s, damn, it was the governor. He was on there running close to being the president of the United States. And he wore a white hat, hood like I wear this black cap on my head. He was a outspoken Klansman. And so we still have that white supremacy attitude and that this hatred going on and this racism going on that our country was built upon. Trump that's his main thing, and that's his followers. And there's a threat that he may take over the government again. So I bring all this up, but I honestly don't know what to do about it. Because I look at prosecutors and tell them, we got to deal with more than just what's on the table. They look at me, we know you're old, but you don't got a little mixed up there, Grimes. We'll get to you later. So I agree with the caller that we do have a situation in front of us that we far outnumber what we should be in prison and in jails and in the criminal justice system. And we need to do something about it. And these young people recognize that. I'm cut off.
Amir, what are your office doing to address these type of issues?
Well, first of all, we have to be honest and acknowledge that they exist, and that it's a problem that not only exists today, but has been a real problem in our criminal justice system, and is why we see certain people in our community who have just profound lack of trust in the criminal justice systems because we didn't always get it right. And not only did we not always get it right, we used it as a way to be a hammer on a lot of people who didn't deserve it. And so there's a couple of things. I mean, the first thing that we did is we don't prosecute simple possession of marijuana, because if you looked at who is being charged and who uses drugs, it's completely disproportionate. And when we see those types of disproportionate issues, we need to make sure that we're being proactive. I think the other part of it too is we also have to be willing to go into the community and say we need to right some of these past wrongs. We did a lot of resentencing of individuals who were sentenced under our old drug laws. For those of you who don't know, prior to 2014, if you had a gram of cocaine and you were at 1,000 feet of a school, an apartment complex, a daycare facility, a church, basically anywhere in the city, you could very easily find yourself with an A felony, which was 20 to 50 years. And that took a lot of people out of our community and destroyed a lot of families for people who were not violent, who were not major drug traffickers, but individuals who were standing at the wrong place with the wrong drug. That same offense today is a level 6 felony, punishable up to 1.5 years in prison. And so we modified a lot of sentences and released a lot of people who were sentenced under these old drug laws because they were really used to unnecessarily hammer people that didn't pose any real threat to our community, but were struggling with addiction or other issues. And so I think it's a combination of we have to acknowledge what we have been doing. But the other part of it is moving forward is we also have to be open and honest and say, when we make charging decisions, how are those decisions being made? And then what data are we looking at to make sure that we are doing a good job in producing outcomes that are fair for everybody in our community? And so one of the things that we did, we actually teamed up with Stanford University, who helped us out evaluating us in terms of what types of charges we filed and what the outcomes were of particular cases, to let us know where do we stand and how can we get better. And that's one of the things that I think is really, really important is we have to continue to evaluate ourselves and acknowledge that race does play a role in the criminal justice system. And how can we be better prepared to deal with that issue of race? But a lot of times the numbers don't lie. And you have to be honest about the numbers and have real conversations with the people who make charging decisions, who make arguments at sentencing. Why are you requesting this? And does this really reflect what the community needs and wants? And so I think there's a lot that can be done, that needs to be done. But I appreciate that caller bringing it up, because all of us have to acknowledge these disparities exist. And if we don't take concrete steps, we're just perpetuating the system that's broken.
Deputy Chief Adams, within the department, I know you have a long history. A lot of people don't know your history. That you've been fighting your professional career to make sure there was diversity within the department and things like that. But specifically, what proactive steps can the department take in order to make sure that we have objectivity in terms of the arrest?
Yeah, I think Prosecutor said it best. I mean, I think we first have to acknowledge it. It existed then, it exists now. And we have to do better as a law enforcement agency, specifically within the law enforcement profession, to one, review data. We have to get independent analysis, those charging decisions. And then similar to what Prosecutor Mears said, which I agree with, is we then have to say, okay, we're not going to focus on driving while suspended, absent any other, circumstance, right? So if you're just driving while suspended, we have to have, a clear message to our police officers that we are focused on violent crime, people who are committing violent acts in our community. That has to be clear. And I think, Chief Taylor started that presence, but I would say we haven't gone far enough. And I think getting that data every year, having someone independently review that data to say that, hey, you need to do a better job on misdemeanor disorderly conduct, for example. Having discussions with law enforcement leaders that 20% of your arrests for disorderly conduct are African Americans, Latinos. But the flip side of that, Nathaniel, two things. I think we have to acknowledge it, and then two, I think we have to look at data. I think three, and this is where it comes back to your point, what concrete steps can we do? We have to have a culture, a messaging. There's 1,700 cops in IMPD. We have to have a clear message to our cops that we want to focus on violent crime. And the reason I say that is because you talked about it, Mr. Grimes, about the numbers, right? The other thing the numbers don't lie about is the victimization. So 123 per 100,000 juveniles victims are Black in Indianapolis. And so we have to recognize that there is a strong victimization of people in many communities, not just Indianapolis, many communities that are people of color. And our cops have to be focused on addressing that issue because, we're not going to ever be in a community where we don't want our police officers taking action for people that are, being violently victimized, or whether they're victimizing children. I think, regardless, Black, brown, white, we can agree that those victims deserve justice. And so I say all that to say, Nathaniel Lee, we are focused on violent crime. We have to focus on our biases. We did that through partnership with the University of Florida. It was called Fairness in Law Enforcement Policing. We've done it with our ABLE, which is active bystander for law enforcement, and getting our officers to something that is against our policy or against our mission, whether it be a use of force against a Black person, whether it be how we're talking to a Black person. Doesn't matter if it's the chief of police, train our officers to step in and stop that and report it. Those are just a couple of concrete things that we've done. We work with our community every day, but I think where we need to continue to get stronger is reviewing the data, so that we can make we can develop strategies for our police, our law enforcement, that steer away from those things that create those biases, if that makes sense. So again, I brought up misdemeanor arrest, for example. If we're seeing an uptick in misdemeanor arrest for disorderly conduct, or I brought up driving while suspended, we need to dig into and say, why are we charging? Is that really an issue in that particular community?
Police chief here in LA.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Milton. Go ahead.
Police chief here in LA enacted 2 years ago this policy: no more pretextual stops. No more pretending that you saw some suspicious conduct or behavior when we all know that's bull. And so that's the policy. But the 7,000 plus line officers don't seem to realize that's the policy. I mean, out there in the field, I have 2 cases with actual body cams showing that, hey, come here, what you doing? What you up to? Oh, what's in your car? Searching it. Officers are still carrying out the old practice of pretending they see something suspicious, writing a report that they saw this and they saw that, even in difference to what's on the body cam. You follow me? So it's like the line officers don't know the new policy. And I'm questioning, well, what happened when I proved that they're lying from the video? What's going to happen with the evidence? A gun was seized over here or in the car or on the person, but we know that the person was stopped because they were in this neighborhood and they're Black. We know that. So I don't even know what the benefit of this law is yet. But that's
is it a law, Mr. Grimes, or policy?
This policy is, Adams. I don't know the effect of this because I've asked a couple of people, even in internal affairs, and they go, we'll get back to you, we'll get back to you. Okay, that's one point I want to make. This lady, I just finished reading the book, On the Run. I'm sorry, I can't remember the author's name. It's a young lady who spent 6 years in a Philadelphia neighborhood studying the sociology of the people and what's happening here in this country. And she comes up with, how people are criminalized because your brother, your cousin, or your uncle, or some relative is involved in the criminal justice system, and they're on probation and they violate probation. And I'm rushing because I don't want to pick up a lot of time, but it's a perpetuation of the fear created of law enforcement. The kids see the cop coming, he turn away. Officers say that's suspicious conduct, arrest him. This is a 12-year-old kid, ain't finished going to Sunday school. You follow me? And the cops stop him. Well, you know what? They're throwing him up against the wall. What you got? That's a roach. Oh, you got some drugs on you. So now they're in the juvenile system. Kids sitting on the stoop, cop coming down the street, everybody get up, walk this way, walk that way. Well, you know what? Somebody is running, and the cop is chasing them. It's just and they become criminal just from running because they don't want to get involved because they know you may find something, put something on me. So it's creating a society that's fearful of law enforcement because they've seen the violence perpetrated by them. They've seen the wrongful arrest perpetrated. They've seen the lies perpetrated. So they have houses that they run to. Don't run to your uncle's house because they know that that's an address you may go to. Go around the corner and run into some stranger's house and hide out there. So it's breeding a fear that you and I may not go through, but we too are uncomfortable. Brother Adams and Brother Nathaniel, Brother Mears, I don't know if you are. I do not like to be stopped by the police. I don't want to be stopped by the police. I just hit a button again. Am I still on, Nate?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I don't want to be stopped because I'm just uncomfortable as a Black man being stopped by the police. Whereas I don't think white people have that discomfort. And I'm a grown man, and I'm an attorney, and I'll go to battle with you in the courtroom, but I'm scared of you out here in the street. And I don't know what you're going to do to address that fear, but that's a truthism. Nathaniel, are you comfortable being stopped by the police?
Never. But let me go to the line real quick because let me get a quick caller. Hey, caller, you have a comment about a topic today, real quickly. What's your name?
Okay, my name is Sherry. I just wanted to suggest something with the gun because the panel said we know our kids are making these guns. So one thing we did in the 80s, if we all grew up in the 80s, when the mothers went on Washington about music, subliminal messages our children are getting, I would like some of our officials and some of our Democratic parties to start looking at laws that are really affecting our kids mentally. Education, since we put these computers in their hands, is failed tremendously from the 80s to today. So I feel like we need to do better as leaders and adults. With the guns, some parents need to be in action and knowing where your children is. But right now, we know since the 80s, they were fighting for subliminal messages coming within our children when it came to rock and roll and when it came to rap, if anybody remembers the 80, 84 era. So maybe we need to start getting on certain things in the industry, what we're putting on the computers, what we are, because some of them are just learning it from YouTube. And I was wondering, maybe that could be a step of us changing something through our parties of leadership, because that would help our kids. Because what we do as an adult.
They call a quick response. I watched between my trials this week in Congress, in the Senate, they had the big tech company, Meta, I can't think of the name of, but they had them before the Senate, and that was the same time.
You're talking about the Apple? Exactly, because right now they got Facebook. We need to attack these companies. I think you're right, because even on YouTube, they put with anything on these computers. Right now, if y'all Google anything you want to learn negative, it's going to be on the computer. We need to sensitize certain things, even in acting. And I hate to say that, but I mean, some of these are large companies that's putting these messages in our children. And TikTok too, if y'all remember, over in Europe, they're fighting TikTok right now. So we need to look at that in America, to me.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Deputy Chief Adam, he talked about what the department is doing, and I didn't know that, but I think it's very valuable because I've had cases where these kids go berserk based on this social media and it cause harm to each other. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen, but it's a problem. So I'm glad that we now know that they're trying to address it.
And here and I actually moved from Indianapolis to Marion County. I'm sorry, not Marion County, Marion, Indiana. And one of the problems I see is I got a lot of grown adults. We might want to censor the meth labs. I know it's supposed to be a rehabilitation, but we might want to look at that too. And the reason why we're getting ineffective adults with their children, because how we're entering medication to certain habit problems, study rehabilitating, which I think that was a law, reforming and rehabilitating was a Bush law. So we really got to look at what the Republicans doing behind screen, and I hope I can be our eyes at this end of the plateau, because they are moving on certain things that we are saying is legally proper, but really not. So we got to look at that conservative party, to me.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Thank you for the panel.
Okay. Unfortunately, Prosecutor Mears, we don't have a lot to say because we have a supermajority in the legislators who are making laws that adversely affect the city of Indianapolis. And unfortunately, because we don't get enough people to get out and vote on election day, we don't control the narrative. They make laws that adversely affect our interests, and we can't do anything about it because of lack of voting participation. We're like 19% of the state population, but we're only probably about 12% of the voting total. Yeah. So we have to do better.
We need to do better because as a consequence, the people where nobody lives are making all the laws for the people where everybody lives. And that's not a recipe for success. I did want to just follow up on what that caller said, because I think it's really important. We've never had more success in terms of prosecuting cases, investigating cases through Kendall Adams' leadership because of social media. We've won a lot of cases. We did 43 murder trials last year. We won 39 of them. But I think it's important when we talk about our kids and social media. If you look at teen smoking numbers, they're down. If you look at teen drug use, they're down. But if you look at overall happiness amongst teenagers, teenagers have never been more unhappy, and it's because they're addicted to their phones and they're constantly on social media. And as a consequence, I think we really need to monitor and look at what's out there on social media, but also the impact that it's having on our kids. Because what we're seeing is there's more and more kids who are unhappy, who are disgruntled, and as a consequence, that behavior is transferring into online beefs, and then we see violence out here in the real world, which I think is something that the schools are struggling to adjust to, but also, us at the prosecutor's office, law enforcement, this is a whole new area for us that needs to be policed pretty proactively.
Prosecutor Mears, you said something I think is key, and I'm sure you can validate this. I mean, we're also seeing bullying, which leads to fear, which can then lead to, gunplay. And so you're exactly right that social media is a major, and I don't even know how we get the genie back in the box, right? I give the scenario that when I talk to youth, they're talking about, I think Mr. Grimes, probably when you were coming up, you were trading football cards. I mean, kids today are trading social media handles to display guns, display money, display women, and it really does. And again, with no these images, these things are being brought upon youth at a much earlier age when they're not, they're not fully developed, not fully equipped to decipher what's real and what's not real. It really can lead to problematic behavior that is very difficult to change if you don't have something in your life that's changed, saying, no, that's not the right way, right? And again, I go back to, a lot of youth are being raised by grandparents or other family members or one-parent households. Nothing wrong with one-parent household. But if you got a one-parent household, a mom who's working or a dad who's working every day, and then you're on your phone looking at conflict by fighting or violence, it can definitely have a detrimental impact. And I just don't know how you roll that back, right? I always say mentorship is important because it played an important part in my life. I talk about my own life's journey with a mother who was addicted to substance abuse. And so the difference in my life was mentorship. But what I see with programs today is a lot of programs want to come in from 8 to 5, not be there on the weekend. What these kids need is a relationship that goes beyond Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And a lot of times when I talk to some of my adult friends, they're like, you going on a Saturday? Oh, bro, I got a tea time here at 10 o'clock. I can't do that, right? And
I'm
my
talking
point
about
is,
Nate.
in order, yeah. But my point is, they really need intensive relationship building. So you got to be there on Saturday. You got to be there at 4 o'clock in the morning. And my point with all that is, I don't see enough of that, and so I don't know how you're going to change the social media piece because it's so prevalent. I mean, it's everywhere.
Kelsey, while you were talking, I did a little shiver, realizing it's not your fault. It's society's fault. You are doing a job with horse and buggy tools, and we're in the space age technology. And these kids are in the space age technology. And I don't think that law enforcement and other institutions have come up to what we are now dealing with and to the emotional thing we're now dealing with. These young kids, 12 and 13 years old, look at us like, you must be the dumbest so-and-so on earth, saying to me some dumb, trying to be my daddy. My dad is on this screen right here. This is more knowledge than you will ever have, sucker. So just shut up. And they tune us out. Honestly, that's how I feel. And Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book, Talking to Strangers. I quoted it to Nate before on this program, where in the back of the book, he talked about law enforcement and how they deal with emotional entities. They got to deal with an insane person 1 minute, and over here they got to deal with a rational person, and in between they got to deal with somebody else. Then they got to go home. How was your day? How the hell you think my day was, going from up and down all day long? And so our law enforcement need to be higher trained, higher educated, and higher paid. Just like many of us that deal with, like airline hostesses or waitresses, they deal with up and down all day, people emotions, different emotions. So it's an emotional job we have, but particularly in law enforcement, there needs to be more training, more education required of the element that they're dealing with. And that's his conclusion about that. Do you agree or disagree?
Hey, Milton, there's one of the caller, Pierre, a quick question. I know you've been waiting all day.
Yeah, I'm here. Are you there, Nate?
Yes, go ahead, quickly, go ahead. I'm sorry, we just had a lot.
Yeah,
going
real
on.
quickly. I just had a comment and a question. You know, in California, the police can't ask you, do you know why I stopped you anymore when they pull you over? Don't know if there's any plans to have that type of policy or legislation here. But I had IMPD and the prosecutor on, and I just couldn't pass up the opportunity as to wonder why election fraud cases in Marion County, when I file a complaint, don't get investigated. And if the prosecutor could comment on the Jodessa Cooper case, because this lady was shot in the head arguing with her boyfriend in the car, and he leaves for 30 days and there's no charges. And I grew up with them, so I just need to know if the prosecutor can comment on that. I want to thank you for taking my call, Nate. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't think I can comment on that specific case right now, but certainly always happy to have conversations with the family or people who are impacted by any particular case. And so if that's a conversation they want to have, certainly we're willing to have that and happy to provide a case update and let people know where we stand with where we're at on that case.
Also, our rules of ethics don't allow you to make specific comments on cases like that, does it?
Yeah, I can't talk about it.
Yeah.
Views and opinions expressed on
Well, I'd like to
Legally
take this
Speaking
opportunity to
are
thank
not
all our
necessarily
special
those
guests
of
for joining us
1310,
today. And
95.1
this is
FM,
Black History
Radio
Month, so
One
this
for
month we're
its
going to be
management.
covering these type topics. And so thank you for coming. Thank you, Prosecutor Mears. Thank you for Deputy Chief Adam. And of course, my superstar attorney, Milton Grimes. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Have a blessed day.
All right, guys. Nice talking with you.
Good to see everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Goff.
Okay.